There are 12 steps on how the Antichrist comes to power, and most Christians know like 2. Christians are deceived about how the Antichrist comes to power. They know he does, but even though the Bible tells us pretty clearly how it happens, they miss it because the clues are scattered throughout Scripture. Because of this, some will say he comes to power when he sits in the temple of God and declares himself God. That's how it happens, they say. Well, that is part of the process of him coming to power. But it's step 11 of 12. There are actually quite a few steps before that. So you can ask yourself, does he really take over the world just by sitting in the temple? No, not really. Why would anyone follow him just for that? Some will say Satan gives him his power and great authority, and yes, that sure helps the process. But that isn't how he assumes political control of the nations. It helps him, but it isn't the only way it happens. The authority is supernatural, but it isn't a magic wand, poof, and it happens. Some will say, well, who cares? Who cares how he comes to power? We just know that he does. If churches in Nazi Germany knew how Hitler was going to assume power and what he would do afterward, it would have made a huge difference. But as it was, many were cheering for Hitler as a hero as opposed to resisting him because he made the country more efficient. And that is exactly what I imagine will happen when the Antichrist comes on the scene. In fact, this is what the Bible tells us will happen. The whole world will view him as a hero, not as the horrible evil that will follow. Understanding how this guy comes to power in advance would allow us to anticipate the steps the Bible tells us will take place. But as we said, the reason people will miss the big picture is because the evidence is found scattered throughout the New and Old Testaments. But in this teaching, we'll gather all of this together and look at the evidence in one place so we can see the big picture. So let's start at the beginning. When we first read about the rise of the Antichrist, in Revelation he's called the beast, and in Daniel, the little horn. In Revelation 13:1, we learn the beast comes out of the sea, which is later defined for us in Revelation 17 as nations, languages, and people. In other words, the mass of Gentile people. In Daniel 7:8, we read about the little horn. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another horn, before which 3 of the first horns were plucked up by the roots. Now, this is a little more specific. The Antichrist begins his career as a human, as we learned in Revelation, but as coming up among a pre-existing group of kings that the Bible calls 10 horns. And then, after he comes up, he plucks up 3 of the horns by the roots. In other words, he overthrows 3 of the kings. Now, in the very next chapter in Daniel, it takes us back a little further in the story, but you could tell it's talking about the same idea as the previous passage. Out of one of them, a horn, came a little horn. So that's the same thing we just learned about, that the little horn, or Antichrist, comes up among 10 horns. But in this chapter, we learn he especially comes out of one of the 10. So how do the 10 horns form? That seems the next thing that we need to discover. We have to go back a couple verses in this new chapter, chapter 8, and we learn that these horns form out of a war that takes place in the Middle East. Behold, a male goat, and that's an empire, came from the west across the face of the whole earth without touching the ground, and the goat had a conspicuous horn between his eyes. He came at the ram with the 2 horns, which I had seen standing on the bank of a canal, and the ram is an empire also, and he ran at him in powerful wrath. I saw him come close to the ram and broke his 2 horns, and the ram had no power to stand before him, but he cast him to the ground and trampled on him, and there was no one who could rescue the ram from his power. So as you're about to see, the 10 horns are going to form out of this war between these 2 empires, a goat and a ram. And the goat absolutely defeats the ram and likely kills its leaders, its horns. Then we read this very interesting line. Then the goat became exceedingly great. But when he was strong, the great horn was broken, and instead of it, there came up 4 conspicuous horns toward the 4 winds of heaven. Out of one of them came a little horn. So the war between the ram and the goat causes 4 of the 10 horns to form, and then out of one of them comes the little horn. So this war between the ram and goat seems the causative event that ultimately brings the Antichrist on the scene. If you didn't know that, that's something to really pay attention to. Now, some will say, hey, wait a minute, that's ancient history. But a few verses later, Daniel 8:17 through 19, we're told 3 times that this passage applies to the end times. So this is going to be a war that hasn't taken place yet. It's going to take place in the near future. And a few verses later, we're told who the ram and the goat are. The ram is the kings of the Medes and Persians, the nations that occupied what is modern Iran. So the ram is modern Iran. We're told the goat is the king of a country known as Yevan. Yevan was an ancient country on the northwest coast of Turkey. So without trying to get too precise in terms of its location, we can say it's Turkey. So the Bible teaches Turkey will defeat Iran and become a great empire, but only for a very short time. Pay attention to what happens next, because it is a real key in how the Antichrist comes to power. Then the goat became exceedingly great, but when he was strong, the great horn was broken, and instead of it, there came up 4 conspicuous horns to the 4 winds of heaven. Daniel 8:8. So we see in this passage the goat becomes exceedingly strong after it conquers Iran. And this obviously scares someone in authority. How is the king of this empire going to be broken, and the empire split into 4 pieces after they just won a war? That's a great question, isn't it? Whoever splits up this empire has to be someone with much more power than a combined Turkey-Iran empire. And the Bible doesn't tell us exactly who it is, but in Revelation, it does tell us what else is going on at the same time, and from that, we can surmise who it is. This is where it really pays to know and consider the entire Bible. This is Bible teacher Nelson Walters, and that's why you follow this channel for insights just like this, to help you see the entire tapestry of the Bible and how one passage in one book of the Bible matches up with another book. If you're liking this video, hit the like button. We don't need extra affirmation, but liking a video is a signal to YouTube to send this video out to more people just like you. And I'm sure you can agree from what you've seen so far, more people need to see this because most people only know 2 of the 12 steps. Now, what is the Bible's answer about who would split a major empire up into 4 pieces? Revelation 17, we learn that a one-world governance system is about to form. And according to Revelation 17:18, this system, Mystery Babylon, rules over all the kings of the earth. Do you think a one-world government would be happy if one rogue country like Turkey invaded another country like Iran and became very great, as the Bible tells us? No. They would want to put a stop to it and probably split the rogue country up into pieces, the way the Allied powers split up Germany into East and West Germany after World War II to prevent them from becoming great again. And that dividing of the empire is exactly what we're told happens in Daniel 8. And a one-world government would be strong enough to force the division of an empire without a war. This is the one-world governance system we believe will begin to form in September 2024 with the United Nations Pact for the Future, where world governance, they hope, will transfer from the nations to the UN. And it's in this environment that the Antichrist is going to rise. If you want to learn more about this pact for the future, there's a link to a video about it in the description below this video. So what you should be watching for initially are, in order, the change in UN governance from what we suspect is national sovereignty, like we have now, to world governance in 2024 or 2025. This may even be the covenant with the many that the Bible mentions in Daniel 9:27. Number 2, then the blitzkrieg attack of Iran by Turkey, possibly during the confusion that's going to happen after this change in world governance. And then 3, the splitting of this new Turkish-Iranian empire into 4 sections enforced by the UN One World system. At the same time, then, it's likely that the other 6 horns will form as well, completing a total of 10 horns. Scripture assumes, it seems, that we're going to recognize them when they come. And we need to all be alert for the next step after that, because after the 10 horns form, the next step is going to be devastating. But first, stealthily, a little horn will arise in that Turkey-Iran region. He will be a little horn compared to the full-size 10 horns, we're told, at least at first. But he won't have forgotten what the UN did to the Turkey-Iran empire, and he plans to take vengeance on them. Look what Revelation 17, verses 16 and 17 says about this. And the 10 horns that you saw, we just saw them form, right? They and the beast will hate the prostitute. And that's the one world governance system of the UN. They will make her desolate and naked and devour her flesh and burn her up with fire. For God has put it in their hearts to carry out his purpose by being of one mind and handing over their royal power to the beast. So as you can see from this passage, this burning of Mystery Babylon is the step after the 10 horns give their power to the beast. So the 10 horns and the beast revolt and burn what is likely the capital city of the UN, which is the one world governance system that we've been talking about called Mystery Babylon. And they seize power for themselves. So how can a few Mideast nations overcome the one world governance system but just split the Turkey-Iran empire up? This is another reason it pays to know the whole Bible, because the answer is in Daniel 11:39. He shall deal with the strongest fortresses, certainly the UN would classify as that, with the help of a foreign god. So the 10 horns plus the little horn have help from a supernatural source. Let's look at a graphic that displays all the steps we've discussed so far. The forming of the one world governance system of Mystery Babylon is 1. The Turkey-Iran war is 2. The splitting of the new Turkey empire up into 4 pieces is 3. The rise of the 10 kings is 4. The stealthy rise of the little horn is 5. And the 10 kings revolt over Babylon and the burning with fire is 6. And the 10 horns giving the Antichrist power is 7. That brings us back to Revelation 13:3, where we read this about the rest of the progression of the Antichrist rising. One of its heads seemed to have a mortal wound, but its mortal wound was healed, and the whole earth marveled as they followed after the beast. It seems that it is right at this moment, right after the 10 kings give the Antichrist power, that the Antichrist is mortally wounded, possibly by UN forces, or more likely by the 3 horns that he is going to uproot. Now, I favor this idea of the 3 horns he uproots as being the ones who try to kill him. Maybe they're unhappy when they learn who the Antichrist really is after they give him power, and they regret giving him that power. And, they plan some kind of assassination. And if they try to kill him, now almost succeed, it would give the Antichrist a very good reason to uproot them once he's healed, right? Why did he uproot the 3? That would be a perfect reason they tried to kill him. But he is healed because miraculously he's healed by Satan. And in this healing, Satan empowers the beast like no man on earth, other than Jesus, has ever been empowered. And they worship the dragon, for he has given his authority to the beast. And they worship the beast, saying, who is like the beast and who can fight against it? This granting of authority leads to the worship of the beast by the earth dwellers, as we just saw here in Revelation 13:4. They have seen the beast overcome the system that had been a totalitarian boot on the whole world. In their eyes, what the beast did to revolt against Mystery Babylon was a heroic act of freedom. They saw him apparently killed then, and then apparently resurrect. And then they saw him granted authority, and this last part led to them worshiping him. Why? In this previous video, we had discussed how that authority might be granted to the beast and why Satan is willing to grant his authority to a common individual, a man, who becomes the beast. It's our assumption that the healing and the authority are all part of a genetic upgrade that Satan does on this man, the beast. In that video, we give the biblical evidence for the Antichrist being transformed from a human to a hybrid, half human, half fallen angel. Transhumanism, in other words. The end of this video will provide a link to that video so you can watch it because it's a must-see. And we surmise it is at this point, after the world sees that the Antichrist is apparently brought back to life, and after he has become a hybrid, a Nephilim, in other words, with the powers of a god, that he walks into the temple of God and then proclaims himself to be a god, and people buy it, and they worship him. He is a hero to all of them. He's obviously bigger and badder than any other being on the planet. And it is then his reign of terror, the great tribulation, begins. So we've been filling in this graphic. We can add the steps we just talked about. The apparent assassination of the Antichrist and his apparent rising back to life under Satan's power. The granting of authority to the Antichrist by Satan, which is likely a genetic upgrade. Then the plucking out of the three horns, the sitting of the Antichrist in the temple of God, and then finally, step 12, the beginning of the Great Tribulation. But what I'm sure you're wondering about is that hybrid genetic upgrade idea. Click right here to keep watching and discover that the Bible has numerous passages that discuss the Antichrist and even the 10 kings. We've been talking about the 10 horns becoming human supernatural hybrids. Sounds crazy, but you got to see it. Till then, this is Nelson, and I'll see you there.